Welcome back. Another episode of the Whole Nine Yards podcast. Drew Pien here with Brandon Krikorian. Week 12 just concluded last night, and definitely safe to say that this week shook the playoff picture up a bit and definitely might have changed our playoff picture. Without further ado, though, let's just get into the games. First game that we'll talk about here, Titans-Colts. Definitely not a game I definitely didn't expect it to go this way. The Titans ended up winning 45-26, and the game, in my opinion, was basically over before halftime. Derrick Henry had an absolute insane day, 27 carries, 178 yards, 3 touchdowns. Ryan Tannehill had his pretty typical day, not the best, not the worst, 13 for 22, 220 yards, a touchdown. A.J. Brown had a nice touchdown reception. People are saying he's quietly turning into one of the best wide receivers in the league. I think he might be a bit overrated, but regardless, he had a great day. And the Titans now are in sole possession of the AFC South, and it's looking like they're going to win this division now. The Colts are definitely still in it at 7-4, only one game behind the Titans. They split their division matchups. Brandon, any reactions to this game?
Yeah, I agree with you that it was pretty surprising to see it be such a blowout. It was really never a close game at any point. Titans controlled the entire game, and I think we both had the Titans in our picks last week, but I think
Yeah.
neither of us were really sure who we thought was going to really win the game. I think we both thought it was going to be a really close game. It could go either way, and it was a complete opposite. And it's not even like the Colts even played that bad. It's more just like I think the Titans were just I think they played like their best game of the year. I just don't think any team was going to beat them this week. So I still am going with the Colts for the division. It's something that we've been talking a lot about in these last couple weeks. But I'm still going to go with the Colts. Even they're still only tied for head to head. So as long as the Colts, I guess if they tie, it'd be division wins, which there's still games left to be played. But again, the Colts schedule is pretty easy down the stretch. So I still believe in the Colts. I don't know if you've flipped or if you were ever on the Colts at all, but I'm gonna go with Colts for the division and for the game. Yeah, it was like I said, it was a blowout game. Henry was amazing. I actually think AJ Brown's pretty good. I think he's maybe not like overrated, but he's maybe a little overhyped, just a little bit. But I think for the Titans, they haven't had a receiver like that in a while. So just to have like a big time receiver to go along with Henry is going to be huge when it comes to the playoff because teams are only going to be trying to stop Henry, which I don't think any team really can. So having Brown out there is just going to be a huge addition to an offense that's already pretty lethal with Henry.
I'm super excited to see the Titans in the playoffs. I mean, they're going to be in it regardless, most likely, whether they win the division or not. I always doubted this Titans style of team. And right now, I'm not second guessing it yet, but I am very intrigued to see this team in the playoffs. Obviously, we saw them last year. They upset the Patriots, upset the Ravens, ended up losing to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, but who knows if that was a fluke or not. I definitely want to see this Titans team in the playoffs this year. And I'm really just looking to see, like, can a team with like a running back led offense, this type of team, can they go far in the playoffs? Or is this a team that just ends up not being able to beat a team like the Chiefs because the Chiefs have the much better quarterback and the much more lethal offense, and the Titans just wouldn't be able to keep up with a team like that? I'm interested to see it. I've never been a big Colts person talking about the Colts. I think the Titans win this division still. I picked them to win the division last week. I still definitely thought this game would be a lot closer than what it was. But yeah, I'm going Titans. I'm not a big Phillip Rivers person. The Colts didn't play horrible, but well, I don't know. They didn't. I mean, they got blown out. They got blown out. So we'll see how the Colts look. It's not completely over for the Colts in the division race, but I mean, the Titans, they have a game up, so I still think the Titans are the favorite to win that division right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. I just looked at the Colts schedule, and again, this is something we've been talking about for a pretty good amount of time. But the Colts go Texans, Raiders, Texans again, Steelers, and then Jaguars. So I really would say the only tough game is the Steelers, but that's second to last week. So I mean, with the way the Chiefs have been playing, it's I guess for that number one seed, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be the Steelers guaranteed. So that I guess could be a tough game only because they'll probably be playing that game. Um, and the Raiders game could be tough, but if the Colts are really going to be, if they think that they are one of the top teams in the AFC, which I think they're not one of the top teams, but in that middle part with like the Titans and the Bills, then they should be able to win these next three games, which is Texans, Raiders, and then Texans again. And obviously they'll win that Jaguars game at the end of the year. But if they can win these next three games, which I think they can, if I believing what I believe and what their team can be when it comes to the playoffs and what I think they are, then they should be able to win these next three games. And I think they can win the division from the Titans.
So the Titans play their final 5 games are Browns, Jaguars, Lions, Packers, Texans. That's not a scary schedule to me. The Packers, sure, that'll be a tough game. You might even lose that, but right now the Titans could probably, I mean, if they lose that game, the Colts would have to win out. If they only lose the Packers game, the Colts would have to win out. So I don't know that the Colts have an easier schedule. You could even argue the Colts might have a harder schedule. It depends on what you think of the Browns. We'll talk about that later in the show. But yeah, I mean, who knows with the division? But we'll move on. I still think the Titans are going to win it, but I know you think the Colts. We'll move on to the next game though. In the 4:30 o'clock window, Chiefs at Bucks. It was not how I expected it to go, really. The Chiefs ended up winning 27-24. I think to start, I mean, Tyreek Hill had an insane first quarter, and overall for the game, 269 yards on 13 receptions for 3 touchdowns. I think, I mean, initial reactions on Tyreek Hill is just, I've always been a Tyreek Hill person. I've always thought that he's slightly underrated when it comes to people ranking top 5 wide receivers. I definitely think he's a top 5 wide receiver. And if you wanted to argue he's up in that 3 category, like if you said he's 3, maybe even 2, I don't know if I'd agree with you, but I'd have a tough time saying you're wrong, especially when no matter who you're playing, you almost always have to have one corner on him with safety help over the top at all times. So he's always going to demand a double team. He's so fast. And at any time he can just destroy the game. It's what he did against the Bucks. I mean, and again, an insane first quarter. Nobody on the Bucks could defend him. The defensive plan from Todd Bowles was not great. Just not good. Did not handle Tyreek Hill well at all. Mahomes, obviously, probably the front runner for MVP right now, according to most, I would say. Had an outstanding day, 37-49, 462 yards and 3 touchdowns. Getting into the Bucks offense, it's more of the same kind of Bucks offense we've been getting the whole year with this inconsistency, identity crisis, not sure what they are. And it's starting to get to the point where I'm definitely worried. This offense, many people have said that it's going to, who knows, it might not even ever click this year. I still think it will eventually click, but I'm definitely worried. It just doesn't make sense to me. I think Bruce Arians deserves a bunch of blame right now for this offense. Sometimes it feels like they're kind of like what the Pats were in 2018 with this run, play action offense. And Brady doesn't have to be Superman. And then sometimes it's a spread offense and it's every weapon is on the field. AB, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Gronk, all these players. And it's, Brady's prime 2007 Brady. Let's just, huck it down the field and score 50 a game. And I don't know what this offense is going to be or what is best for it. I haven't put too much thought into it, But right now, it's not looking good, and they got to fix it quick for sure.
Yeah, staying on Bucks. I was like reading some stuff last night about how their offense is just completely different than Brady's used to in New England. With there's not a lot of pre-snap motion. There's not. It's just more. It's more like stale. Like kind of what you're saying. Like doesn't like it seems like they're doing one type of offense and then they'll just switch it to another type, and doesn't seem to real be a good flow of mix of offense with all the weapons that they have. And you can't rely on Brady. He's 43 or 42, 43, and he's not the same guy he was even 5 years ago with how great of a passer he could be and how he could carry you in a game. I don't think he could do that anymore unless you're just playing an inferior team. But against the good teams, I don't think he can just carry you anymore. So you need to be more creative offensively, and I really don't blame. You have to blame Brady for some of it. I mean, he has 11 interceptions this season, which I think is second in the NFL behind Wentz. So, not all 11 interceptions are everyone's fault. Obviously, it's his fault, at least for most of them. So there's definitely blame for Brady, but there's a lot for Arians, and I'm not sure how the rest of this year is going to play out. I still think the Bucks are one gun at the end of the regular season are going to be one of the top teams in the NFC. Like I said last week, I think this week was their last game before they started clicking, and it didn't help that they were playing the Chiefs because the Chiefs are the best team in the NFL. But I think next week and the weeks going forward, the Bucks will be fine. I think they'll end the year with a top record. There'll be a wild card. They can't win the division, but I think you'll. I'm gonna say they're probably gonna be in the NFC Championship game. I don't know who's gonna agree with that. I don't know if you are. I know you're a Bucks or at least a Brady guy, but I think they're gonna be in the NFC Championship game. I think they're gonna start figuring it out, and I'm not. And if that doesn't happen, I wouldn't be surprised if Arians would get fired at the end of the year. I don't know what you think about that, but I wouldn't be surprised if they really struggle down the stretch and they maybe don't even win a playoff game. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets fired.
If this team goes whatever record, if they lose in the wild card round, I would have no problem with firing Arians, especially if they end up going 10-6, 9-7 territory and end up losing to a less talented team. I would have no problem firing Arians. I don't think he's done well. It's kind of unfair because of the whole COVID training camp thing, but still, everyone's dealing with the same circumstances here. I would have no problem with it. Arians needs to play to Brady's strengths. Nowhere in this offense, the whole Chiefs, this whole game, I don't think any of it played to Brady's strengths. Brady's strengths are screens. When he's 43, his strength is ultimately running the ball to set up play action, short passes. Again, setting up, giving Brady the opportunity to make adjustments pre-snap is huge. Brady's mind is right now his biggest strength. Comparative to the rest of the league, and he needs to be able to use that. Chucking the ball downfield is not Brady's strength at all. It's his biggest weakness. His deep ball has never been his best attribute, other than maybe 2007 territory when he was prime. His deep ball was great, but at 43, it's not there anymore. You got to play to Brady's strengths in this offense. Even if some wide receivers have to suffer, like a Mike Evans, like a Antonio Brown.
Well, I think the problem is that the receivers that they have are big play guys. Like Mike Evans is a guy who he can run a short route, but he's more of a intermediate to long, like a deep route. That's more of the player that he is. He's more of a jump ball kind of guy, a 50-50 guy. So I think Godwin's probably the best receiver for Brady because he can run, the deep route, but he's more of like an intermediate and short guy who can make plays after the catch. While Evans is more of a guy who you throw the ball up to and more than likely he's going to come down with it. But like we're saying, like Brady's really not that deep thrower that he used to be. And the last time he had, this type of receiver like Mike Evans, not saying Mike Evans is Randy Moss, but the last time he had a player like that to go down the field and someone who can get those 50-50 balls and be physical was probably Randy Moss. And Brady's just not the same guy that he was in 2007. So I think they definitely have to be utilizing the screens. Now, it doesn't help that they're running backs. Like Fournette's not pass catcher. I don't really think Ronald Jones is either. He's definitely better than Fournette. I like Ronald Jones better than Fournette.
I agree. I do as well. But yeah, no, they definitely don't have a James White, any sort of guy
Yeah.
who's like great at catching the ball in the backfield. They don't have that, and that would be. I think that's what's missing in this offense. When you look at Mike Evans, I agree 100% that he's more of this big play guy, 20-yard route and further type of receiver. And well, that's cool and nice to have to stretch the field. Brady's never even needed somebody to stretch the field, especially recently. He hasn't had that since Randy Moss for the most part. I don't want to say it's like a curse in disguise or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what you call it, but sometimes I do think Mike Evans kind of hurts this offense, and I'd love to see maybe in the offseason he develops some sort of, short route game. I would love to see that for sure, because right now Mike Evans' strengths are Brady's weaknesses and vice versa on that. Chris Godwin, I agree 100%. He's the best wide receiver on this team for Brady. He can kind of do everything. He can run whatever you need to run. I will say the mental awareness of the wide receivers on the Bucs is nothing close to Edelman type level. I think what made Edelman great with Brady was that they were always on the same page with option routes, with where to be and when it's Edelman picking up that, oh, okay, the defense is blitzing, so I need to give Brady, I need to run the route this certain way so Brady throws this, etc. I don't think the Bucs wide receivers are there yet on that type of level. I think that's going to take into the offseason to get to that, which is why the Bucs might not make it to the Super Bowl or the NFC Championship game this year. But
Well, I think that's one thing that this year didn't help is that they didn't have a training camp, they didn't have time to get that chemistry down, which is why I was saying last week was that after this game, I think it's been 12 weeks. This week was the 12th week, and I think like by now, this is kind of when if you were have a normal year, this is when you'd be rolling. Like if you had the training camp and you had all the chemistry down with your wide receivers, especially on a new team, new system, I think this would be the time of year where everything would start clicking. So I think after this week, this is why I've been saying this, is that I think the Bucs are going to get clicking with Evans and Godwin and Brown, and Gronk's actually been pretty good this year for what he was supposed to be.
yes,
Um,
agreed.
but I think with the other wide receivers, especially Godwin and Evans, Brown's more so not so much. I think it's more so Godwin and Evans. I think these last couple of weeks they have a bye this week, which I think is really going to help. One, just to get them like distracted from football for a week, just to get them like to clear their heads, and then they can come back and have a week of practice, which I think is going to be huge for them going into this final stretch. Which is why I think that they can reach the NFC Championship. Why I'm picking them to reach the NFC Championship. Again, obviously the seedings, but I still think they can, just because this bye week's coming in at a huge time, and this is the time of year where in a normal year they'd be clicking and rolling. So that's why I think that.
Yeah, the bye is definitely going to help them, but they got to click now. They got to click against the Vikings. In 2018, the Patriots had a similar type of thing to this. The offense was never clicking. They did not know the identity. They didn't know if Brady was in his physical prime, able to carry you, or if they had to transition to this type of run the ball offense. It was the last month of the regular season, and eventually they realized, all right, we're going to do this play action type offense and set Brady up for success rather than have Brady be Superman. And that eventually worked, and that obviously they won the Super Bowl. They beat the Rams that year. They even ended up going to Kansas City and beating them in Arrowhead that year, and that was a shootout game. The Patriots able to win a shootout game without having Brady be the Superman type of guy, and ideally that's what the Bucs end up being, where Brady can still win a shootout game against the best of the best without having to play the superhero role. Anyways, though, we'll move off the Chiefs Bucs and we'll move on to the Sunday night game, Bears Packers. My initial reactions on this game, it was a blowout from the start. The Bears defense played very not good, obviously. Not having Akeem Hicks, I don't think it really mattered this game. Aaron Rodgers played essentially flawless, 21 for 29, 200 yards, 4 touchdowns. I mean, if this game was any closer, I mean, Aaron Rodgers probably goes for 6 touchdowns, 400. Like, I mean, obviously they took the foot off the gas there towards the end. Trubisky didn't have the worst day ever. I'm not a Trubisky guy. I think he's toast. I was never a big Trubisky guy. So it's more of a thing for Trubisky lovers to talk about. He didn't show me anything today, though, that's for sure. I thought it was pregame, and I forget which reporter it was, but they were talking about their discussion with Mitch Trubisky, and they said that Mitch Trubisky said that he wanted to cherish this moment because you never know how much longer this stuff like this lasts. And that just made me think, yeah, like I feel like he almost knows he's like done. And that's a bad sign, obviously.
Well, I think
Yeah,
it's true. So
it's true. I mean, Trubisky, I didn't even need to see this game to know he's done. He did not play well, not the worst game, but again, I mean, the whole team played horribly. You have to look at Nagy at this point, and again, the Bears are going to have a very difficult offseason. The front office has to know Trubisky's done. I know this is still the front office that made this draft pick, so maybe it's going to be hard for them to move off it, but they're going to realize Trubisky's not the guy. They're going to realize Foles is also not the guy. They're going to have to find a guy, and they're also going to have to kind of look at Nagy and say, all right, let's say we draft a quarterback in the first round. Do we want to have him with Nagy, who might potentially get fired after a year, or do we want to fire Nagy now and bring in some young offensive coach that can pair and they can start at the same time, the rookie quarterback and the rookie offensive coach, head coach, and kind of do that where, we're setting up the quarterback for success rather than having this thing where we draft a quarterback, we go 7-9, and Nagy gets fired the year after. Personally, I definitely think you can fire Nagy. I don't think he's, he obviously won Coach of the Year a couple years ago, and that Bears team went, I think, 12-4. I want to say 11-5, something like that. But Nagy, the past couple years has looked bad. What do you think about Nagy? Like, are you firing him or?
well, that's what I was gonna say. Is I think they clean house. I think the GM Ryan Pace is gone, and I think Matt Nagy is going to be gone at the end of this year, and Trubisky is definitely going to be gone. And Foles, I forget what his contract is exactly, but he's not going to. It's not like he's going to be starting next year. Let's just say that. Most likely, maybe he will for a couple games, but I think they're going to have to start over and rebuild. Maybe not completely rebuild and just completely tear it down. You still have a couple of key pieces on that defense, and I just think I just don't think this is going to work with Nagy and with Ryan Pace. I think you have to just clean house after this. I mean, to start 5-1 this year, to be 5-6 right now, and just never have consistent quarterback play over these last 4 years, ever since Trubisky was drafted. And he's an offensive guy. He was a quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator with the Eagles and then the Chiefs. So he's worked with quarterbacks his entire career, basically. And they gave him Trubisky. I don't know if maybe that's not the guy that he wanted, but you know what? They got him Trubisky, and he's never been able to figure it out. Now, I don't know if that's all Trubisky's fault, that's all Nagy's fault, that's half and half, what it is, but I think it's time to move on. And again, not completely start over, but you definitely have to start over at some point and rebuild this thing up from not all the way at the bottom, but close to the bottom.
Yeah, I think some sort of small reboot is definitely probably the move. Who knows what happens with the GM? I mean, if Nagy's gone, the GM's also probably gone. I don't think this is a full tank rebuild type of deal, especially because you gave up a good amount for Khalil Mack. You still have some pieces on the defense that are in their prime and playing outstanding. If you touch up the defense a little bit, this defense is still a probably top five defense. And the offense is obviously going to take some work. It's going to take a lot of work, but if you get another coach in there, you get a rookie quarterback who has promise in there. David Montgomery's looked plenty good in the running back position. Allen Robinson, if you re-sign him, at least you'll have a receiver. I mean, this team should be a team that contends for a playoff spot. And right now, their season's over. This was probably the dagger for their year. And looking at their wins, I mean, yes, they started 5-1, but they also, that first game of the year, they should not have won that game. Obviously, that win against the Bucks was it showed more about the Bucks losing that game than it did the Bears winning that game. Second week, the Bears beat the Giants by 4. What I'm saying is the Bears' wins have not been great this year, and their losses, a lot of them have been pretty bad. So yeah, I think the Bears probably do clean house. We'll see though.
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking back at the Khalil Mack trade, and they gave up a lot for Mack. And I mean, at the point of that trade, everyone was thinking that was a win for the Bears, and it's obviously turned around completely. Now, if the Bears figured out their quarterback situation, then it could have been a lot different because they would have had that championship level defense. Like I agree with you. I think their defense is still, despite how like maybe how bad they've been playing and the points they give up. I think it's more just that the offense just can't score, and the
Offense
defense.
can't score and it can't stay on the field.
Yeah.
So
So when the defense on the field all the time, I mean, they're just going to give up points. It's just how it works. And when your offense can't score, there's not a lot of like you don't really feel motivated to play because you just know your offense can't do anything. Which I mean, you could say that sounds stupid, but it's probably been true for the last 2 years for the
oh, for
Bears.
sure. I mean, if I was on that Bears defense, I'm looking at the offense and I'm like,
You know you're barely
what
going
is
to get
going
20 points a
on?
game.
Like, yeah, I know that in order to win, I have to limit the opposing offense to below 20 points. And when I have Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams, when I'm playing Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams, I'm like, all right, well, this game's over before it even starts.
Yeah.
Quickly talking about that Khalil Mack trade. After that, we'll move on. But yes, 100%. When that trade happened, everybody was super high on the Bears for that. They were super excited for the Bears, and they were like, "Wow, John, this Khalil Mack trade is so bad for the Raiders. It's not enough value for Mack." And I didn't necessarily agree with that. I thought that Mack's probably not doing anything on that Raiders team for a while. I'll take the first round picks. I'll take the picks and try to build, from the ground up as the Raiders, because that's where they were really. And I thought it was a fine trade for the Bears. It was a lot to give up, but you clearly saw that a 12-4, 11-5 Bears team or whatever it was, like had they had the quarterback, like you said, had they had that quarterback, then the Khalil Mack trade would have been a win for them too. So I ultimately think it ended up kind of like a nobody won, nobody lost type of deal. But it could have been a win-win trade for sure. I think the Raiders probably have won more than the Bears just because the picks mean more when when you trade for a player in their prime and you don't win, the picks are going to be better because the players are younger. But the picks that they drafted, I mean, obviously none of them have been as good as Khalil Mack. So yeah. Anyways, we'll move on to the next game. Chargers at Bills. The Bills ended up winning 27-17. Yes, 27-17. Brandon, initial reactions on this game?
Yeah, well, one thing I want to say is so from our picks from last week, we had Bills at -4.5, and we both took Chargers uh, to cover that, and somehow the Chargers completed that Hail Mary with like 30 seconds left on the clock, and they got it down to like the 3 yard line. They had no timeouts. They got to the line of scrimmage with 20 seconds left, and they decided not to clock it, which again, it's a 10-point game, 20 seconds left. If you score right there, then onside kick, who knows, you can get a field goal. But they decided not to clock it. They decided not even to run a pass play. They do a run play, which made no sense because you had no timeouts. I think they got -1 yards or like 0 yards. Then I forget, maybe someone got injured or there was a penalty or something. I think someone got injured or no, there's a penalty on Buffalo for roughing the passer. And then they try to do like a pass that they tried to pass it to Mike Williams, and everyone thought it was a run play, so everyone was run blocking. So Mike Williams wasn't even looking to catch the ball, and then they were in shotgun, and it was going to be. I don't know if this is a play call or if Herbert did this, but it seemed like it was going to be a pass play. and he decided to run up to the line of scrimmage and try to do a QB sneak, but the whole offensive line was pass blocking, so he got driven back like 5 yards. I don't know if all those play calls were Herbert or if it was Anthony Lynn, whoever's calling the plays for the Chargers, but that was some of the worst play calling I've ever seen in my life. And again, they still had a chance to possibly tie the game. It's not like they were down, by 20 points and there's no chance. I mean, to complete that Hail Mary was insane. And I just don't know what they were doing. I mean, if you clock the ball, you have 20 seconds left, and then you have 3 plays to get a touchdown by passing the ball. And even not, you could always kick the field goal and then try an onside kick.
Their chances to win that game, I mean, obviously they weren't great. They might have been less than 1%, but you still have a path to victory. You still have to, these plays are still very important.
You always get an onside kick. It's
yeah, for sure. You always have a chance.
I don't know. I just don't know what they were doing. It was just crazy. It was crazy play calling when I was watching that.
I always go to the head coach when it comes to general things like this. Like when it comes to team incompetency, I always look at the head coach. Yes, offensive coordinator, he's the one calling the plays, but when stuff looks this bad, when teams are when they're not gelled together and nobody knows what's going on, that's a head coach thing. Because it generally means the head coach doesn't know what's going on. He's not talking to the offensive coordinator. He doesn't know what the offensive coordinator wants to do. Overall, horrible. I'm not going to put much of the blame on Herbert on this. He's a rookie quarterback. I'm not a big fan of the Chargers coaching staff in general, which is why I'm kind of blaming the Chargers coaching staff here. He's gone.
Yeah,
they're probably cleaning house just like the Bears. But I think we technically didn't get this game right, taking the Chargers, but like we said, you can go back in that episode. I feel like we basically nailed this game.
Yeah,
I think we predicted it almost perfectly with the backdoor cover type of deal, and ultimately it didn't happen. But had maybe if it wasn't Anthony Lynn coaching, maybe that does happen. Unfortunate. We definitely could have used that for our records for sure. But yeah, I mean, it happens. I guess we'll get into the actual game here. I'll get into the actual game. Herbert, when you are losing for the whole game, you're going to have to pass the ball a lot. Herbert threw 52 passes. I don't think he played outstanding, but he didn't have a bad game by any means. They weren't, the Bills defense isn't great, but Herbert was losing by the whole game, so obviously you're not going to be able to run the ball. Just not set up for success. Not a good spot for a rookie quarterback at all. I don't know what you thought about Herbert this game.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't great this game, and I'm a huge fan of Herbert. I think he's going to be a great quarterback in the future, and I think he's, like we said, he's going to be offensive rookie of the year. But this definitely wasn't a great game, but it was a game where I think just the coaching staff, I just don't think the game plan was that great of a game plan. I think the Bills really focused on shutting Keenan Allen down, which, I mean, they did. He had 4 catches for 40 yards and a touchdown that happened in the first quarter. So they really focused on shutting him down. And Austin Eckler just came back from injury, which I think if he hadn't been injured this entire time, I think the record may have been a little different because he's a big playmaker for them. But he had 11 catches for 85 yards. So it just shows you what the Bills were doing to the Chargers. They were basically forcing Herbert to throw short and hope that the running backs and these slants and 5-yard, 7-yard routes could get big plays out of them, which I think if you're the Chargers, you have to come up with a better game plan or at least adjust when you go into half, because you're right. They were losing this entire game. The Bills, except for in the fourth quarter, I think it was, maybe it was the third quarter, they had it was 4 drives in a row for each team. They both turned it over every single time. They just kept giving it back to each other, but it was not a great game plan by the Chargers. And you're right, this is the game that we said it last week where Anthony Lynn's probably going to get fired. I mean, this made it obvious he's definitely getting fired at the end of the year with just how seemed unprepared they were, and obviously how bad they've been all season and how bad he's been all season.
Yeah, for sure. Switching to the Bills, they're playing a completely inferior team. I don't know how to feel about this Bills team still. Josh Allen did enough to win the game. They were ahead a lot, so he only passed 24 times, 18 for 24, 157 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. I mean, Allen's Allen. I've said my opinion on him many times. Inconsistent, and sometimes he can make some outstanding plays with his arm, and sometimes he can look like a fool on the field and not know what he's doing. The running game, it worked for the Bills. Singletary played well. Zach Moss, the backup running back, also played plenty well. Overall, it's hard for me to take anything from this game on the Bills side. They played a much worse team than them. Allen was not able to show off this game. He wasn't able to, he wasn't behind, so he wasn't put in a position where I'm able to gather anything from his play. The defense, I mean, they played well. They limited the Chargers and Herbert to 17 points, which, if you could limit a team to 17 points every week, you definitely take that. But again, this is a rookie quarterback. We clearly have seen how inept this Chargers team has been at times this year. It's hard for me to take anything from them, from the defense of this game, especially because they have not played that well in many other games. So what I'm saying is it's hard for me to really see if this win does not validate the Bills for me at all. I don't think it does for anybody. But the Bills are 8-3. It looks like they're going to win this division. At some point, though, before the playoffs, personally, I would like to see the Bills prove themselves. Next week, they go to the 49ers on Monday night. They could win that game. I wouldn't be very impressed. But the week after that, this is where, this is a big game for the Bills. They host the Steelers on Sunday Night Football. If they were to win this game, I would be very impressed, and I would be to the point where I'm willing to say, depending on how Josh Allen looks, depending on how the defense looks in this game, but if they win, I'm going to assume they both looked good. If the Bills win that game, I would be willing to get to the point where I'm saying, all right, it's Chiefs and Steelers, maybe even Chiefs one tier, next tier Steelers, and I could even put the Bills in that second tier in the AFC, ahead of the Titans, ahead of the Colts, ahead of every other team. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I think I've probably been more of a believer of the Bills than you have. I don't think this win means anything, like you were saying. It's against a bad team and at home, but I I probably see them winning the division. I just think the Dolphins are a little more inconsistent, and I think they definitely have a tougher schedule than the Bills do. But I like the Bills. I don't think they can. I think like when it comes to the playoffs, I don't see them reaching the AFC Championship game. Definitely not, unless they just really get hot at the end of at the end of the season and into the playoffs. But I think they'll probably end up they're 8-3 right now. They'll probably end up 11-5. I would say best 12-4. But again, I've been more up on them than you have, but I'm probably right in the middle with them. I don't think they could do much in the playoffs, but I also think they're a good enough team where you have to respect them definitely, and they're going to be a tough out whoever they play. But I don't really see them doing much.
Yeah, I don't see them doing much in the playoffs. In my opinion, I don't think they're as good as the Chiefs. I mean, I ultimately think in the AFC it's going to just be the Chiefs. I don't think any team will be able to dethrone the Chiefs this year. Uh, but if the Bills are able to climb up that AFC hierarchy to the point where they're on that second tier right below the Chiefs, then going into next year, that's where I'm willing to say, all right, the Patriots, unless they make some drastic moves in the offseason, they're not going to be there. The Dolphins, they're probably not, they're inconsistent. They're probably not on the same tier as the Bills, probably not very close. If the Bills are able to prove themselves in this playoff, and then in the offseason they make a couple acquisitions, Allen's going to improve. He's young still. I mean, this Bills team, I've hated on them, but they have potential for sure. Definitely for sure. We'll move off the Chargers Bills though, and we'll get into the last game that we're going to recap. Cardinals at Patriots. I'll start here. Overall, it was a very, I'll call it a very boring game. Both quarterbacks did not play well at all. Um, Newton had a bad day. I'll call it a bad day. He in post game he said, he's just concerned about the final score, which is obviously important. But assessing the Patriots right now, you're not going to win games when your quarterback goes 9 for 18 for 84 yards, no touchdowns, and 2 picks. This was the only game this year that you were going to win with a stat line like that. Horrible. Newton has to play better. This offense has to play better. The rushing game wasn't really there. They were behind in the first quarter, but as that game went on, they did get a lead. So the rushing game wasn't really there. The offense wasn't there in general. Myers has continued to prove to me that he can be a number 2 wide receiver on this Patriots team. He can be a guy. He can be that Edelman replacement eventually down the road, potentially. That's what he's proven to me, that he could be that. But overall, this Pats team, they're 5-6. Their playoff hopes are, 1%, 2%, 0.5%, something like that. They haven't looked good on the road. They didn't look that great in this game. The defense played well. I'll get into that right now. Murray had a very bad game, probably one of his, if not his worst game of the season so far. I want to say this is the first week he did not throw a touchdown pass. He went 23 for 34, 170 yards, and one interception. Kenyon Drake had a solid day, only 3.5 yards average carry, but he had 2 touchdowns. I'll talk about Stephon Gilmore. Gilmore had a great day against Hopkins. Hopkins was held to 5 receptions for 55 yards, which I would say, if you're playing the Cardinals and that's Hopkins' stat line, you would take that 100 out of 100 times, especially because he's by far their best offensive weapon. And with Fitzgerald out, he's really their only offensive weapon. Andy Isabella is there, but he's more of he's closer to a gadget player than he really is like an established number 2 receiver. But yeah, I mean, the Patriots defense at home, they played well. They feasted on not feasted, but they played very well against a rookie, not a rookie, but a young quarterback, which they typically do. Belichick typically has success against younger quarterbacks. Although Murray did have some bright spots. He didn't have the worst day ever. But yeah, the Patriots barely squeeze out a win. It really doesn't mean much. If anything, this means more to the Cardinals because the Cardinals dropped to 6-5. We'll potentially get that into that next week. We revisit the playoff picture. Cardinals dropping to 6-5 is pretty huge. Anyways, Brandon, what are your reactions to this game?
Yeah, this was a bad loss to the Cardinals. I had the Cardinals winning this game, and again, I thought it was going to be a tough game the entire time, which it was. It was not an easy game whatsoever, even if the Cardinals had won, which is what I thought. That's what I said last week, was that Belichick and the Patriots are going to make it really hard on Murray. And yeah, Hopkins, 5 for 55. He really didn't do anything. No big plays, no touchdowns. Gilmore really did shut him down. And the thing that saved the Cardinals was that the Rams lost the 49ers, which still at least gives them a chance for the division. Obviously, Seahawks play Monday night, and if they win that game, again, the division's not over, but it definitely be leaning towards the Seahawks winning the division. But the Cardinals, I think this is just a team that's a young team with a young coach in Kingsbury, who did not coach a great game. He really hasn't been that good in his decision making these last couple of weeks, which again is kind of expected with a young coach like that. And this was a game where I thought if they win this game, I think they'd probably win the division, but they lost. They had that terrible pick by Cam where they got the ball, I think, at the 50-yard line, and they played kind of conservative, and they didn't really try to push the agenda, and they mostly just stayed where they were, and they tried a 45-yard field goal, and they missed with a kicker who's really not that good. So at that point, that really lost. I mean, that did lose them the game because they Patriots got the ball back with under 2 minutes left, got into field goal range, and made it. So I'm not really sure what was with the conservative play calling there, especially with Murray. He didn't have a great game, you're right, but I feel like at that point in the game, you just have to you have to be calling some shots and get more into field goal range. 45-yard field goal is not an easy field goal for anyone, especially for their kicker. So I just didn't really like the play calling and decision making by Kingsbury in this game.
I don't think the play calling was good. But I will say, given how Murray was playing, I'm not going to say it was a egregious call by Kingsbury to say, hey, you know what? Instead of risking anything, let's just try to play a little bit conservative here. Let's take a field goal, 45 yards, and we'll see what happens. I'm not going to say, that he should have tried to engineer some, not trick plays, but, tricky plays or risky plays to get a closer field goal or to score a touchdown. At the end of the day, I feel like you have to trust your kicker to make a 45-yarder. Obviously, he didn't, so in hindsight, it's a bad call. But personally, I have to trust my kicker to make a 45-yard field goal. And I'm in a game like that. If it's a shootout, obviously, conservative play calling is typically bad. But it was 17-17. Murray had not had a good day. The offense had not had a good day, only scoring 17 points. I mean, that's not a lot, especially for one of the best offenses in the league, at least on paper, statistically. So I don't think it was the worst call ever, but I mean, agree to disagree there. Yeah. We'll move on though. I think overall we'll get into the NFC picture later, but I think the Cardinals losing this game definitely it changes things with, the 49ers at 5-6, the Vikings at 5-6. I won't even say the Bears at 5-6, even though I just did. Buccaneers at 7-5. Everything's it's a little bit different now, especially from like a week ago, 2 weeks ago. We'll move on though to something else here. I want to try reacting to an article. So there's an article on NFL.com. It's by Adam Schein. His name's Adam Schein. It's called Fact or Fiction. That's what his article is called. And essentially, he has these statements about last week, about in general, about MVP or whatever. And he reacts with, yes, this is fact, or no, this is fiction. And then he gives some explanation. We'll read the statement. We'll read what he says, a little bit of it at least, whether he says fact or fiction, then we'll give our opinions on it. I'll start with the first one. And the first one is Patrick Mahomes is the MVP. And he says, yes, this is a fact. And Aaron Rodgers and Ben Roethlisberger would take the silver and bronze spots on the podium if the season ended today for him. I'll start this one. For me, right now, if the season ended today, yes, this is a fact. Patrick Mahomes is the MVP. He's played like the best quarterback, in my opinion, so far. Earlier in the year, in our earlier episodes, both of us were on the Russell Wilson hype train or whatever for MVP for him for this year. His recent play has derailed that. I still think it's tough because it might just be over for Russell Wilson. He might just not be able to recover from a lot of his poor games, too many turnovers. But I think he has, a backdoor chance if Mahomes plays poorly. But as of right now, yes, I will agree that this is fact. Mahomes is the MVP. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I also agree with it. I think when looking at Wilson, he's had too many bad games to get him to be the MVP. If there was no clear cut next player, then he'd still have a better chance. But Mahomes, he's first in passing yards, which really doesn't mean much. But when you're also on a winning team that's 10-1, it just shows you how good he is. Because usually guys who lead passing yards are guys who are on bad teams who are always losing. He has 30 touchdowns, which is tied for second in the league, and he only has 2 interceptions. He had one against the Bucks, so he really only had one interception this entire time, and he's first in QBR. So he's definitely been the best quarterback this year. He's been the most consistent quarterback the entire year, and unless something crazy happens with his play, he's probably going to be the MVP. And if you want to look at their record, they're going to finish 14-2, 15-1, whatever it is. So I don't think there's any doubt about it.
Yeah. Would you say Aaron Rodgers is in second place right now? No, I would assume so. I don't know though. Yeah.
I guess he would be. Just looking at teams with top records, and then it's usually going to come down to the quarterback and looking at the quarterback stats and his play. So I guess it'd come down to Rodgers, but it's he's definitely a clear cut number two, not like a 1B.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. We'll move on. Second one here. The Bucks offense will figure it out before it's too late. He says that it is fiction. I'll let you start on this one.
Well, I think this is kind of like what I was saying earlier and last week that uh, they will figure it out, and I think that this bye week is just the perfect time to have the bye week because it's going to allow them to kind of go down to the basics, and hopefully Brady can put his input into the offense and be like, let's run what I'm used to and what I'm good at, which is what we've been talking about, which is what should happen. That's how they should run their offense. So I think it's the perfect time. I don't think it's too late yet, and I think going to the playoffs they'll be fine. So I I would say that uh, it's not going to be too late, and their offense will be fine.
Yeah, I'm going to say that this is fiction. I think the Bucks offense will figure it out. Obviously, we talked about this a little bit before. I am definitely worried, but I'll agree with him and you that this is fiction. Uh, I'm not ready to to cross out the Bucks offense quite yet. I'll move on to the next one. The Rams had the worst loss on Sunday. He said that this is fiction. He goes on to say that the Raiders' 43-6 loss to the Falcons was very bad. I'm also going to say this is fiction. In terms of the division and in terms of, the playoff picture, sure, the Rams had the worst loss on Sunday, but the Raiders had just looked so impressive. I feel like I was almost kind of riding the Raiders hype train, maybe more than I should have been. And there are definitely a lot of people that were in the same boat as me that were like cars, this is what this is what he should have been. This is what people thought he could have been, and he's been great. And you end up coming out next week and losing 43-6, a horrible loss. I would say that's my worst loss of the week. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I'd probably agree with you. Or I'd rather say the Raiders was the worst loss, or possibly the Colts, only just because they were never in the game, and it was a game that if they won, they're most likely definitely winning the division. But now it's definitely um, it could be either team, the Titans or the Colts. But the Rams loss was definitely a bad loss because if you think you're really going to the week they were 7-3, if you really think that you're one of the top teams in the NFC and have a chance for the NFC Championship game, maybe even the Super Bowl, um, that's a game you have to win at home against a depleted 49ers team. They got a couple players back for that game, but the Rams offense was terrible. Golf played awful, like 2 picks, and I think they had I think how many turnovers? I think they had 4 turnovers. Yeah, they had 4 turnovers in the entire game. They played really bad in this game, and over the course of the game, they didn't deserve to win the game. But going into the week, that's a game you have to win. You can be 8-3. At worst, you could be tied with the Seahawks for the division. So uh, I think that's a game that they should have had. But I think the Raiders and or the Colts had the worst loss of the week.
Yeah. Next one, four NFC West teams will make the playoffs. He says, unfortunately, ultimately, I have to say that this statement is fiction. He says he envisions Tampa stumbling into the playoffs. I'm also going to say this is fiction. I would be shocked if all four NFC West teams made the playoffs. I ultimately think at best 2 will make it. At best 3 will make it. I think still 3 teams will make it from the NFC West. I think the 49ers are that team that does not make it. I think that either the Rams or the Seahawks probably win that division. The other 2 are wild cards. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think the 49ers are going to make the playoffs. I agree with you. I think 3 teams will make the playoffs out of the NFC West, and I don't see if this was a healthy 49ers team, maybe, but they're not healthy, so I can't say that they're going to make the playoffs.
Yeah. Next one, the Titans just won the AFC South. He says, I'm not quite ready to call it, so I will say fiction. I'll start this one. I would say fiction. The Colts obviously technically can still win the division, but I picked the Titans to win the division, right? I will say fact. I will say the Titans just won the division with this game. Their schedule is not harder. It's not that much harder than the Colts, if it is harder at all. They really only have one difficult game. If they play how they should, they should finish 12-4. That most likely will be good enough to win the division. So I will say fact here.
Well, I'm gonna go fiction. Obviously, I picked the Colts to win the division. Even after this loss, I still have them winning the division. So, and even one thing that he mentioned in this article was that, which I did forget until just now, was that DeForest Buckner was on the reserve COVID-19 list for this game, which I don't know how much of an impact it would have made, at least against Henry in the run game, but it definitely would have made a difference. Again, would they have won the game because of it? I don't know, but he's one of the top defensive linemen in the league, and he's a big part of that defense, him and Darius Leonard. So I think getting him back, I think he can return next week. I'm not sure if he actually had it or not, or if he was just on the list. But he's going to be huge down the stretch for them. And yeah, I think the Colts, you say that the Colts may have a tougher schedule than the Titans. I think it's rather the same, or maybe even the Colts have an easier schedule, at least in my opinion.
I would say they're comparable.
Yeah, I think you could say they're definitely comparable. And you could lean either way depending on who you think is going to win, I'd probably say. But I think the Colts can still win this division.
Yeah, we'll go next one. The next one is the Browns are legit. He says, "Oh, comma, heck yeah, dash, dash. This is an absolute fact, exclamation point." I'm just going to flat out disagree with this. We've talked about the Browns. We're both not high on the Browns. They're 8-3. Again, we'll revisit the playoff picture later. But for this specifically, I do not think the Browns are a quote unquote legit team. Again, you'd have to kind of define legit, but yes, they're 8-3. They look like they're going to end up getting a wild card spot potentially, especially with the Raiders falling to 6-5. Do I think the Browns win a wild card game? Most likely not. Definitely would not pick them in a wild card game. Obviously, anything can happen in the NFL, but I'm not picking them in any wild card game at all. So, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I agree with you. This is fiction. I don't think that the Browns are legit at all. They played the Jaguars in their last game, and they struggled with them. It's a team that was 1-9 going into the week, and they had Mike Glenn starting at quarterback, and they barely won the game. It was basically a 3-point game or one possession game the entire game, and it ended up being a 2-point game. So I don't think the Browns are that good at all. Their defense is, I would say, good, but I would say probably average. Obviously, they have Myles Garrett, who's probably the second or third best defensive lineman in the league, but Baker is not that good at all. They rely on Chubb and Hunt a ton, and if they're not going to have huge games, then they really can't win games because they're not going to be able to pass the ball effectively if teams know they're going to be throwing the ball. So I don't think the Browns. I agree. I wouldn't pick them to win a playoff game right now. They would be playing the Bills. I'd pick the Bills in that game, and anyone that the Browns would play, I'd pick the other team. So I don't think they're legit at all.
Looking at the remaining Browns schedule, they have Titans, Ravens, Giants, Jets, Steelers. That's pretty tough. If things go how I expect them to, they'll probably end up 10-6, losing to the Titans, Ravens, and Steelers and winning against the Giants and Jets, but who knows? Maybe they end up 11-5, 9-7. But looking at their prior games, I don't think there is one win where I can say, yes, this is a win where I say, yes, you are a playoff team, and I can clearly tell by this game. I'd say their best win. We talked about this earlier in an earlier episode. Their best win was probably against the Colts. They won 32-23. But again, this was back on October 11th, almost 2 months ago, when the Colts were not nearly as jailed. They were only 3-2, 3-1 heading into that game. So I'm not going to say that was, a great win. Phillip Rivers had 2 picks that game, and I'm not going to attribute that to the Browns defense. I'm going to attribute it to Phillip Rivers having a rough start to the year and ultimately being a hit or miss quarterback like we've talked about. I'm not big on this Browns team. Their offense, like we've said, is not good. Baker Mayfield has not proven that he can pass the ball especially when they're losing, and the defenses know it's pass. So yeah, I'm fiction on this all the way 100%. And this is, out of all of these so far, this is the strongest fiction I've felt, for whatever that means. We'll get into the next one though. The next one is the Patriots will sneak into the postseason. I'll let you start on this one.
Yeah, this is. I would say this is fiction. He also agrees with me there. He says this is fiction in the article. They're not going to get into the playoffs. I don't see them. They're 5-6 right now. I don't see them even like they have to basically win out in the AFC.
They would have to win out. There's no way they would, like, they
They
would
have to win
be,
out, and
yeah,
there's
they
no way
have
that
to.
they're going to win out. So
Yeah, no, I 100%
I,
agree.
especially, I mean, like, it's not even like they are a good team. Like, I know you're a Patriots fan, but I think you'd agree. Like, they're not even like, again, they're not like a bottom team. I'm not saying that, but they're not a good team.
They're not a good team. I don't even like, the only reason that this statement is in this article is because it is the Patriots, and because, obviously they've been the greatest team over the past 20 years. They'd have to win out to make the playoffs. They probably would make it at 10-6. I'd say at this point they probably would make it at 10-6. But I mean, they'd have to go on the road and beat the Chargers. They'd have to go on the road and beat the Rams. They'd have to go on the road and beat the Dolphins. They'd be at home, but they'd have to beat the Bills, and they'd have to beat the Jets at home, which they probably would do. They could easily lose any of these games except probably having the Jets at home. They could end up losing the next 4, and I would not be surprised. I would not be shocked.
Yeah.
I
don't see them winning.
I agree. This is fiction 100%. Even though I'm a Pats fan, I'm going to, I can only be so biased. I would say this is fiction 100%. Next one, the NFC East winner will be Frisky in January. He says frisky is a fun word here, but still this is fiction. I'm also going to say this is fiction. Well, I'll say it's fiction, but I don't feel as strongly as he does about this. He says whoever ends up with the number 5 seed will hit the road on Wild Card Weekend and smoke the NFC East champion. I'm not going to say that. Wild Card Weekend, it's Wild Card Weekend for a reason. That's why it's called Wild Card Weekend. Anything can really happen. We've seen it in the past with the Seahawks at the 7-9 Seahawks back in the day. Anything can happen, especially when a team is home. That's a big advantage in the playoffs. I don't necessarily think that whoever wins the NFC East will get smoked. But again, are they going to go on a run? No, at best they win 1 game. So I'll say fiction.
Yeah, I agree. I'd say it's fiction, but I don't feel as strongly as he does. I think we've said this before that whoever wins this division, they have a real shot at winning that wild card game. And right now, it's the Giants winning the division, and that's who I think is going to probably win the division, unless the Cowboys can beat the Ravens and then string some wins together. But I think it's probably going to be the Giants when it comes to the playoffs. And right now they're playing the Rams, which I think is. I said earlier the Cardinals are probably the best team for the NFC East winner to play and to have a chance at winning. But with the Cardinals at 6-5 right now, and that loss to the Patriots, who knows if they can even get to the 5 seed? I would say like between the Rams and the Bucks, I think you'd rather play the Rams. So if that is how it works out, and the Rams are the 5 seed, I think whoever wins the NFC East has a really good shot at winning that game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think really good shot is more than 50%, but I mean, yeah, they've got at least a 10% chance. I'll say that, and that's
I mean, I don't know. I feel a little higher than that.
I would
I'm
say. I
not
mean,
as
yeah, I feel
down.
higher than 10%, but I'm just saying like I don't
Yeah,
know. I'm
I'm
saying
not.
they've got a real shot. They've got a real shot, but ultimately, I'm only saying it's fiction because are they going to win anything more than one game? No, that
No.
they're not likely to even win one. So we'll leave it at that. We agree on that one. Last one here. It says Aaron Rodgers is the most talented thrower ever. He says it's a fact. I will say fiction on this. By what I'm guessing when he says most talented thrower ever, sure, it's a fact, I guess. Who can make the most, jaw dropping throws. Again, one that I'll reference is the throw to Jared Cook. I want to say, I forget which playoff game that was.
2016
Yeah, 2016, like
division
that.
round against Cowboys.
Yes, yes. Like a throw like that, obviously that is a jaw dropping throw, absolutely incredible. So yeah, sure. If that's what qualifies as the most talented thrower ever, sure. But somebody like Peyton Manning, somebody like Tom Brady, just to avoid bias, I'll talk about Peyton Manning here. Peyton Manning, doesn't have the arm that Rodgers has. He never had the mobility. He never had the throw and the run potential that Rodgers has. But Manning was much more accurate. Not even much more accurate, but he was, he had a better mental game. He was much better at the line of scrimmage before the snap, pre-snap. He was essentially an offensive coordinator and a quarterback mixed into one. Again, he doesn't have the same talent, I guess, but the mental game, the short throw accuracy, and Manning still had a great arm. So I'm gonna call it fiction. When we get into like whoa, like it took so much talent to make this specific throw, sure, but it's hard to compare it to somebody like Manning and Brady. They're just very different. I don't think Rodgers could do what Brady or Manning does. I don't think Brady and Manning could do what Rodgers does. Ultimately, I'm not a big Rodgers guy in terms of like all-time rankings type of thing. So I'm going to say it's fiction. I still think Manning all-time is a better quarterback than Rodgers. I'm going to say Brady still is an all-time better quarterback than Rodgers. So, yeah.
I would say about Rodgers being the most talented thrower ever. I'd probably say that's fact, at least that I've seen. Like I never got to see the guys in like the 70s, 80s, and 90s play, so I can't really say anything. Obviously, I know what they are and I know what they've done, and I know like Dan Marino was a great quarterback, like a great like thrower of the ball. Like you'd probably say Dan Marino, but I never saw him play, so I can't say anything. But again, you're right. Like Brady is definitely the most accomplished quarterback. Like Montana is, Manning, like stats, Breeze stats, yes. But I would say in throwing the ball and making certain throws and be able to use their arm to fit into tight windows or go sidearm or make crazy, they can throw the deep ball, the short ball, sideline on the run. I'd probably say Rodgers. Now, in 10 years, that probably could easily be Mahomes. It's only been a couple of years in Mahomes. I don't think you could say right now he's better than Rodgers, just because Rodgers has been 15 years, while Mahomes it's been 3. But right now, I'd probably say Rodgers.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I kind of hate this type of like statement or question. I think it's kind of semantics in a way, just because I don't know. Like I would still, Aaron Rodgers is the most talented thrower ever. Okay, I don't know, whatever. But like I would still take Manning over Rodgers if they're
Well,
both
I
in their
think that's
primes.
not what the question's asking though.
I mean, yeah, but it's kind of I don't know. I
Like
get
arm,
like I
like if you
almost
look
get
at
like
arm talent,
borderline as a Brady fan, I feel like I almost even get borderline defensive because it's like offensive to me because I don't even want any sort of like somewhat stemming argument that Rodgers is close to Brady just because Rodgers is such a diva in my opinion, and I can't say such a diva, but there's
like
a
when,
reason Rodgers has only gotten one Super Bowl, and
but
even
again,
somebody like Eli Manning has two.
I can agree with you on stuff like that, but if you were strictly just to look at like if you were to build a quarterback and you're like whose arm would they have,
Yeah.
you'd probably pick Rodgers.
Yeah. No, you're
Like you
probably
wouldn't
right on
pick like
that.
Brady wouldn't be up there, Manning wouldn't be up. I mean they'd be up there, but they wouldn't be up there. It'd
Yeah,
probably be like
no, that's fair.
Marino,
Sure.
Favre, Rodgers, Mahomes, something like that.
Yeah. No, I that's fair. I mean, I
But
guess.
I don't think like again, and I agree with you. I think Brady's definitely the better quarterback. It's not even a question. But for arm talent, I think it's something that really doesn't mean much because I mean, like you're right. He only has one Super Bowl, so and Brady has six,
Yeah.
so it doesn't mean as much. But yeah, I think the most talented thrower, at least that I've seen, would probably be Rodgers.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. I think eventually this guy does mention Patrick Mahomes. Like when Mahomes' career is close to being done, if he could take it over. I think Mahomes, in terms of most talented thrower ever, arm talent, I think Mahomes probably does overtake Rodgers, to be
Well, yeah,
honest.
that's
But
what I was saying. I was like, in 10 years, like you could probably easily say it could be Mahomes, but
yeah,
we don't know yet. But I think that's something that you could easily project out.
yeah. Anyways, that's the 9 things. That's the 9 statements he had. So, I mean, we're a small podcast, but I guess shout out to Adam Schein for the article. Fun to react to. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Whole 9 Yards, though. If you stayed to the end, which if you're listening to this, I'm assuming you probably stayed to the end. Appreciate that. We have an Instagram now, by the way. It's I believe it's the.whole9yards, correct, Brandon?
Yep.
So definitely drop that a follow. Also, we're on Spotify. Not sure, obviously you may be watching this on or listening to this on Spotify, but we're on Spotify and YouTube, by the way. Drop a follow on Spotify or whatever. Feel free to share with other people, all that type of stuff. You get the gist of it. Brandon, anything before we call this episode?
No, not really. Just do that, share it, subscribe, follow, Instagram, Spotify, all that stuff. Tell people about it, and yeah, the NFL season's coming to an end. It's going to get interesting with the playoffs. Who's going to make it, and what team's going to come out when it's all said and done for the Super Bowl. So it'll be exciting for the end of the football season.
Yeah, at some point, either next episode or the week after this, or after this week's games or next week's games, I guess we'll call it. We'll probably talk about the playoff picture. Obviously, NBA off season will, season starts up in about 22 days or whatever it is. So we're going to start talking more NBA, even baseball. We'll see what happens. So yeah, stay tuned. Again, one last time, follow the Instagram, follow the Spotify, all that type of stuff. But that's going to wrap it up. So we will see you guys, Thursday, Friday?
One of those days will be before next week's games.
Yeah, before next week's games. So, predictions and all that stuff, typical stuff coming up next episode. So yeah, peace.